been pretty down on the algorithm here on this channel. And no, I don't know why we are suddenly referring to ourselves by the royal we, but it makes us feel fancy, so get off our back. Seriously, though, I do worry a lot about how algorithms affect our lives, about how social media is designed to create this echo chamber that pushes our happy buttons to keep us scrolling to the detriment of both our own mental health and the collective health of society. A lot of research has been done on this over the past few decades now, showing how the way these sites are built and the way that we interact with them are leading to increasing isolation and radicalization. But there is a new series of 4 studies just published in the journals Nature and Science that purport to show evidence that where we are today isn't totally due to algorithms, but more to individual choices. I need to say up front, though, that this research should not be used to let social media companies off the hook, which I'll get into the details of why after we talk about exactly what these studies are. Way back in the before times of 2019, Facebook, aka Meta, committed to giving 17 different social scientists across several different institutions unprecedented access to user data on both Facebook and Instagram, which is a nice change of pace considering the institutions that they usually give our data to. Supposedly, the idea behind the Facebook and Instagram election study, as it was known, was to allow scientists to examine how social media companies influence elections and alter democracies. These are the first 4 studies that have been published with this data from this collaboration, with one appearing in Nature and 3 others appearing in a special edition of Science. One paper just looked at the breakdown of misinformation on these platforms. Asymmetric ideological segregation and exposure to political news on Facebook found that conservatives interacted with the most misinformation, which it's not super surprising, but what even I found a little shocking is that the misinformation was almost entirely found amongst conservatives, with no equivalent on the liberal side. Don't get me wrong, liberals definitely fall for misinformation online. It happens all the time. But apparently, when you're looking at the nearly full set of US-based users that are active on the platform, which was 231 million users during the study period, the number of conservatives spreading misinformation is so large that it makes the liberal dumbasses look like a tiny statistical blip. The other 3 papers all dealt with the question of whether or not social media companies can stop the problem of political polarization and misinformation by tweaking the algorithm. In How Do Social Media Feed Algorithms Affect Attitudes and Behavior in an Election Campaign, researchers divided about 50,000 users into 2 groups. One got the regular Meta algorithm, and the other got a chronological feed. Right? Like imagine seeing posts from your friends in the order that they're posted. Imagine chaotic. In reshares on social media amplify political news but do not detectably affect beliefs or opinions, researchers prevented a group of users from seeing reshared content, which would be posts from people who they don't directly follow, but who someone they do follow decided to share. And in like-minded sources on Facebook are prevalent but not polarizing, which is the one Nature article, researchers cut back on how much content users saw from like-minded individuals and groups to kind of combat the idea of an echo chamber. In all 3 of those studies, the researchers found that the interventions did not end up decreasing political polarization or change political activities like signing petitions. So that's it, right? It's not the algorithm, it's the people who are making these decisions. Well, not so fast. As always, it's a bit more complicated than that. First of all, this research was done at a very heated time in American politics. It was the end of the 2020 election cycle, by which point the damage may have already been done in terms of political polarization. Conservatives may have already been firmly entrenched with their attitudes. Additionally, even though the studies didn't show a change in political polarization, they did all show what, in my eyes, are some substantial quality of life improvements. For instance, moving users out of algorithmic feeds substantially decreased the time they spent on the platforms and their activity. The chronological feed also affected exposure to content. The amount of content classified as uncivil or containing slur words they saw decreased on Facebook, and the amount of content from moderate friends and sources with ideologically mixed audiences they saw increased on Facebook. Meanwhile, removing reshared content substantially decreases the amount of political news, including content from untrustworthy sources, to which users are exposed, decreases overall clicks and reactions, and reduces partisan news clicks. And lessening the echo chamber increased their exposure to content from cross-cutting sources and decreased exposure to uncivil language. The fact that these interventions didn't have a short-term effect on political polarization during the most politically polarized time in recent American history doesn't mean that they wouldn't necessarily work long-term. And it doesn't mean that there wouldn't be these other benefits. But because interventions like chronological feeds made people decrease the amount of time they spent on the platform, Meta has no real incentive to institute these changes except for, concern for making the world a better place, which is no incentive at all under capitalism, because those $12,000 remote control hydrofoil surfboards aren't going to buy themselves, are they? Seriously, dude, go get a $100 foamy from Costco and learn to paddle. Finally, let's talk about the biggest red flag of all, or I should say a blue flag with a white F on it. All of this research comes from the benevolence of Meta itself, who, for privacy reasons, did not allow the researchers to access any of the raw data themselves. As Joe Bach-Coleman, a social scientist at the Columbia School of Journalism, told Science, the partnership is restrictive and not the best way to study these technologies. Even though Meta states that they didn't pay scientists, they didn't tell them what to analyze, and they didn't interfere with the final product, they did ultimately control the data that, in the end, suggested that there's just not much they can do to stop this darn polarization. And we should take that with a big grain of salt. Also, worth noting is that back in 2021, an anonymous whistleblower released tens of thousands of pages of internal Facebook research. The documents revealed that Facebook had evidence from a variety of sources that hate speech, divisive political speech, and misinformation on Facebook and the family of apps are affecting societies around the world. They showed that the leadership was aware that the site was becoming angrier, but that Mark Zuckerberg refused to make changes because they would prevent users from staying on the site longer. That whistleblower did eventually reveal her identity as Frances Haugen, a former data analyst for Facebook who for 2 years studied the site's algorithm and how it spreads misinformation. She testified before Congress that Facebook consistently chose to maximize its growth rather than implement safeguards on its platforms, just as it hid from the public and government officials internal research that illuminated the harms of Facebook products. She told CBS News last month that the company has actually prevented researchers from studying its operations and even resorting to legal action against those who exposed the truth. They've sued researchers who caught them with egg on their face. Companies that are opaque can cut corners at the public's expense, and there's no consequences, she said. She's also pointed out that the company did make changes in the lead up to the 2020 election in the hope of preventing violence, thanks to their algorithm. But they reverted those changes right after the election was over. Of course, in the month that followed, we know extremists used Facebook to plan a whole insurrection. So, oops. So this is certainly an interesting group of studies. And if you like this sort of thing, I do encourage you to check them out. They're all open access. As always, links are in the transcript on my Patreon. You can find a link in the doobly-doo below. But while these studies are interesting, they're also very flawed, and they're clearly being used by Facebook as a way to redirect attention away from what their own internal documents prove, that their algorithm actually can exacerbate or ameliorate problems like political violence, but their decision-making will always ultimately be influenced by money. So please don't take these 4 studies as evidence that there's simply nothing social media sites can do to fix the problems that we see on social media. Yes, the internet in general has allowed weird people to willingly seek out and find each other, which has been great for marginalized communities and even for people like me who was able to connect with other skeptics and atheists at a time in my life when I didn't know any of those sorts of people in the real world. And yeah, that also means that extremists can seek out and find each other, people who want to form a community based on hatred and bigotry. And yes, individuals will always seek out news and other voices that already agree with their own opinion. That has been true since the beginning of humanity. But there's simply no question that the design and implementation of social media affects our decisions on every level in the same way that we've been affected by the design and implementation of advertisements and shopping malls and supermarkets and everything else since before social media even existed. We can't stop demanding that these corporations take some responsibility with their own decision making. And I didn't think that I would have to say this at this point. Like, I've been doing these videos for so long. I feel like you guys know me, but comments on another recent video I made, you need to hear it, I guess. So here we go. Tax the rich, legislate nefarious corporations like Meta, disrupt a billionaire's life, and put down your phone and go touch grass at least like once a day. Hey everybody, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like. If you loved the video, please subscribe. And if you think the world could use more videos like this and you happen to have a few bucks laying around, head to patreon.com/Rebecca and join an awesome community of nerds like the people whose names you see on the screen right now. Thanks.